Tēnā koutou, te mihi tuatahi kia noitu aku riri te mana whenua. Tēnā koutou katoa i ngā tangata he rata, nau mai, haere mai, ki tēnei hui. Tēnei mātou nā kaimahi o te tangihira taiao ki Waitaka, mā pango, mā whiro ka au ki te mahi, mauri ora ki te whare.
Tēnā koe, Greg nau I whakatū pera nei, te hui I tēnei rā, nō reira tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa, nau mahara mai ki te hui wai me te whenua, mo te kauni te whāio, ki Whakatau, welcome to the water and land. Hui, today, thank you Greg for opening us up. I've been informed that we have a quorum and I declare the meeting open. Are there any apologies? David East for Waimate with the Lowell Waitaki, and I take it Councillor McKenzie for lateness. Okay. Are there any conflicts of interest of the items of today's agenda? None. We had no request for public forum, Deputations or Petitions. Are there any extraordinary or urgent business today's meeting? None. And there are no notices of motion. Therefore, we move on to 7.1, the unconfirmed minutes of the meeting on the 13th of March 2024. Recommendations on page 9. And are there any clarifications on that one?
I just want to identify that I'm in the present list and I'm also in the apologies list.
So were you here or were you not here? Kia ora, Councillor Burns. It's good that you can't be in two places at once. So you're not a god yet.
I'm gonna have to move it. So.
On that note, if there's no points of clarification, Councillor Burns moves. Is there a seconder? Councillor Robinson. Any comments on those two? Would you like to speak to this minutes at all? No? Kapoi. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? None. Carried. Kia ora. Moving on to the reports, section number 8. The first is 8.1, the Water and Land Committee Resolution Status Report for May 2024. And I'll ask
Kia ora, Chair, and I don't really have anything in particular to say. I'm delighted that it's all marked green and all the resolutions have been completed.
Well, thank you, Tim. Any questions or clarification of Tim? None? Sorry, Councillor.
To ask about, so I can see it's gone green on the sort of nitrate water quality roadshow, and I'm just wondering, do you know if there's, I know that, well, I think so in Waikato is still slowly working towards doing something out in the community, and I think Waimakariri, I know Claire, Councillor Mackay asked about this with the zone committee. I'm just wondering if there's any others, because it feels like a shame that didn't really come to more. I just wonder if any other zone committee other than Selwyn and Waimakariri are looking at this. Are we aware? Are we keeping some holes burning on it? But
thank you. Through you, Chair. So those are the only two that we know of who are progressing, but it did go to all of the zone committee side of facilitators to have that conversation about what they wanted to pick up, and it doesn't mean that they won't in the future. So that's just where the status of where it is at the moment, but it's still sitting there, something that they could pick up.
Just in regards to that testing workshops, I noticed Greenpeace has been around the regions as well. Is there any sort of coexistence within that space with Environment Canterbury or completely no?
We're not working with them at the moment, but we do know that they've been in communication with us around what they're doing, so we're aware of what they're doing.
Sure, okay, thank you for that. Any other points of clarification? Otherwise, Councillor Mackay will move. Have a seconder. Councillor Ward. Any comments on that? You can? No. Otherwise, all those in favour, please say aye. Against? Oh, pointed.
just a wee comment regarding private well testing as well. And I just think it falls into that sort of testing of nitrate category. I really seriously think we need to look at uptaking some of the private well testing and get them onto our country maps. I really do. And, so if that progresses, then I'd appreciate some sort of feedback on that.
We noted that Councillor Robinson and Tim will take that further. So we were, sorry, kind of Councillor moved, Councillor Ward seconded it. We just had a little bit of discussion, no further discussion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye, against, none, carried. Sure. Moving on to 8.2, the portfolio work program, water and land, on page 17. We asked Nicole, please come forward. Nicole, welcome.
That was just blinking a minute ago. You might need to use the other speaker.
Kia ora, Chair. Is it working? Yeah. Recommend that this committee receives the Water and Land Work Programme report for Q3. It's Q3 from the 1st of January 2024 to the 31st of March. The attachment to the back of the paper will also be presented to the Audit, Finance and Risk Committee on the 16th of May with the addition of some further financial information. Just with the timing of this committee being prior, it's not within that attachment. I will take the paper as read, noting that for Q3, all of the levels of service targets and all of the key initiatives are on track. And we've got 2 levels of service targets that have now been achieved for the full year, being 2.3b, which is assessing each of the monitoring networks at least once every 10 years, and also 9.2, ensuring that greater than 25% of all consented farms are audited. We're at 33% at the end of Q3. So, this will be the last quarter update. The next update for the next reporting period would be the annual report, which would cover the full year.
Kia ora, Nicole, thank you for that. Any points of clarification from Councillor Cuthbert?
Yeah, kia ora. I've got 3. Well, sorry, I missed the run through this one, so, but you can always take it away and come back. For 3, under the collect and publish data, so given the title of that, I'm assuming that, so this is to undertake targeted science research, investigations and matters relevant to policy. So I'd assume that those reports that are being done will ultimately come into the public domain. So firstly, is that correct? They'll end up being published in our collection of that we have now. Yes, for the ones where it says collect and publish, it will be public. Is it possible, or is there already a list or some information outlining what is being looked at? Because that would be great to have that sort of oversight of what is currently in train, when is it expected, that type of thing.
Yeah, thank you for the question. Very good timing, because on Friday I'm sitting down with the science leaders and we're working through the research scopes for the next year. So, and out of that, we should be able to generate a list that's happy to make that available.
Would that be just to us as councillors or to the public? And in part, what I'm thinking is, people often might have information, or be just interested to see what's happening.
In all honesty, I haven't thought that through. I'll have to think about that, and not trying to withhold anything, but I just need to think about that. So, thanks.
And then my second question is for target 7. So, working with my Tapu community industry and regional city and district councils on urban water quality improvement, and I was wondering, do we still have a member of staff who is engaging in the more polluted urban catchment. So I know that we did have member staff in the past who was going out to like the industrial estates and identifying sort of potential risk businesses and working really closely with them to sort of lift their standards where needed to be or doing comms. So is that still happening?
For you, Jen?
Yeah. I think you're referring to the role we used to call pollution prevention officers. I'm not sure. Could be. So those roles we don't have anymore, but we have staff who are doing proactive work with industry to improve pollution in certain areas, like you might remember the little plastics as an example. So there is still work being done.
Yeah, it was good again to just get a sense of how much of that's happening and where. You know, broadly, I don't know the specifics, but you know, we know about some of the stuff that happens in terms of ponds and the types of activities with our rural campaigns. We get oversight of that, but I'm really unaware of them, you know, picking up on it. I do remember now the noodle thing. I think I heard that through the SU stuff that I used to do rep on, but I haven't, not sure that I've had that come through as a councillor. So yeah, it'd be nice just to get a sense of what are we doing, bearing in mind that I see that, you know, this sort of engagement under compliance is 100% general rate. It'd be nice to know for our city residents who are paying contributions to that, how much support our city is getting to improve its water quality through the work that we do. So it'd be, yeah, I'd just like to see a bit more on that. And also hope that appease the notion that we don't actually do anything for our city as well. I think that would be good on all fronts to get them done.
Point Councillor Southworth about the urban waterways, and yeah, we hear that from some others around the table here about urban waterways and what are we doing. So just clarify that. Do you have one more point, or is you?
I forgot to say, Kathy, do you want to say something to somebody?
Kia ora to the chair. Within the surface water team as well, Councillor Southworth, we have a scientist that works in the urban area and works in with the community groups on the water quality, dealing with stormwater discharges, concerns, emerging contaminants, things like that. So yeah, we do have, you know, dedicated resources in that, and we can share further information on their work with you. That would be helpful.
That's hopefully great. And then, yeah, my final one was around target 8.1, which is the emerging environmental issues. And we've noted that Auckland Karakia and the work progressing with that. I remember with the, I think it was the NIWA report, earlier on when we started realising what was coming at us, also identified concerns around the sort of upper Waimakariri lakes, like Lake Pearson and up around that area. And I wondered what are we doing with that, because it's all very good focusing on the one that we now know is actually really critical, but are we still doing something on those others that we know is coming? Ooh, sorry.
It's all right, I'm trying to make eye contact with Tim over there around that. Look, one of the absolutely aware of the fact that with some of our high country lakes from the monitoring results was that we need more action. But I mean, one of the activities we recently did was reaching out to particularly high country fed farmers to go, okay, we've got Oti Karakai, what's the understanding of what's happening and the connection across, and they took the initiative, which some of us went along to run a high country fed farmers field day. But that's about engaging, and there was, some of the landowners there did talk about that, what you need to be thinking about, even if that doesn't feel nice, with the challenges of consent reviews, etc. But it was about exactly that factor of how do we get others also helping to realise that change is coming.
On that class, so that sounds great. That's like a one-off event. Is there some sort of like ongoing process in order to arrive at a point where we've sort of got more certainty around what's going to happen in order to avoid?
I think this comes back to the work we're doing in transition to three core services and having an aligned approach across all the mechanisms we can utilise in the space. So I think it's a work evolving to get there.
Kia ora kōrua, Councillor Mackay.
All right, so yeah, mine relates to the 25, page 25, around the financial performance reporting, which has got to be confirmed. I find that quite surprising because it's a March quarter ended and it's now the 6th of May, and I know this was coming out a week ago. But do we have any updated figures? I mean, other than obviously I see it's going to go to half on the 16th, but yeah, well ended.
When these papers are written up, that's some time ago, it has to go via our executive leadership team. And just at the date that this was due, the finance team was still working on it. So we decided rather than rush and risk inaccurate figures, to allow the time that they were prepping. They were prepping for the audit finance risk date. They were, and I felt it was too late to bring this paper to the Water and Land Committee in June, post that. So decided to bring this much information while it was still, more timely, and just exclude the financials. That makes sense.
Good explanation. But do you have the updated figures that you can provide us today? I mean, if this doesn't print our next meeting, June, so if that, it seems to be quite a gap, and considering that our committee is not a committee of the whole, do you have it?
I'm sure we'll be able to circulate that, but I will check in with the finance team. Come back by email on that one.
Kia ora, Councillor Mackay, that was one of the questions I was probably going to follow it up at the end, and if they could be circulated to all the councillors sometime, if it's later today or tomorrow, so that'll be helpful. Thank you for that. And I have Councillor McKenzie. Then Councillor Ed.
Thank you, Chairman. Look, with regard reporting point 12 on page 18, we're reporting the lower platform. I guess if I could describe my concern is that the public, the media, and the public sort of perception is that quite a lot of all our rivers pretty much degraded to a large extent. And when you actually look at the lower numbers, quite a lot of the rivers which are being publicly classified as degraded or in a bad state are actually in a pretty good state. And I guess so. I've got questions about how the information was interpreted, whether it's done by Lara or is that this is just the raw material we're sending. But then also why are our own communications not saying that the Ricard River is in pristine state, the Ashburton River meets all requirements of the NPS for fresh water, although there are some marginally elevated nitrates from the native state. I mean, putting a picture out there so our constituents actually know what's generally going on, rather than this media headline, irrigators or swimmers or industry has totally wrecked and polluted rivers, when the rivers are, in that particular river they're talking about in the media, is actually in a pretty good state of health. Because and the purpose for my question is because if we are going to have some credibility with our community, our description of their local rivers needs to match what they're seeing on the ground, and quite often it doesn't. And I'd cite the Hines River as an example of that. But also, it's distorting the debate. If everybody in Christchurch is told the Ashburton River, for sake of argument, is buggered, then in fact it's in pretty good health. And of course they never go down there, so they don't know. The people in Ashburton are saying, what are you talking about? Actually, you're not going to come up with decent policies or decent actions to actually solve the problem, because nobody understands what you're talking about, because everybody's got a different view of what's going on in reality. So I guess a big question in that, but I am concerned about the way we're reporting and publicising what we're reporting.
Through you, Chair, and I might just call on Catherine as well, possibly to assist with an answer on this. I guess a couple of comments that I would make. The first is that in terms of the science group in Environment Canterbury, we work very hard to report as it is without putting any I mean, we have a kind of a mantra of talking about being honest brokers, that we will say it as it is and that we're not trying to put any particular emphasis on it either way. So when we're reporting, as we do through LAWA and other places, this is what the results are. These are what the results are. And that's an important part of what we're trying to do. I think, you know, and Chaplin can comment on this better than I can, but in terms of the media through, you know, we don't control that. What I would say is that I'm in the, I'm going to say privilege, but I'm in the position where I get both sides telling me either way, and I could equally point to the number of times that I have been told that we're only reporting the good news, and that there's only we have some kind of bias where we refuse to point out the bad things. As I say, in the science group, we try and just point straight down the line and not trying to use pejorative terms or anything like that, and that puts us in a difficult position. And again, I'll call on Taplin to respond a little bit more around the communications and engagement side of it. But there is a lot of effort put into reporting the really good work that is being done. And again, I'll pick that up.
Thanks through you, Chair. I don't know, Ian, whether that answers your question or not. The LAWA information is data that is supplied to LAWA, so that is displayed as is. As Tim said, that's the data being displayed there. So it relies on us to then use our own channels to go out and tell the story around what work is happening on the ground, the sort of the more holistic picture, if you like, so which we do through our channels like the website and social media, directly to stakeholders and so on. But if there is anything in particular that any councillors are noticing that is perhaps missing, or that there's a community that isn't receiving a bigger picture, then that's certainly something that would come back through the comms team, and then we would go to the science team to look for whether we collect data that can feed into that story. So I don't know whether that answers your question or not.
If I can make come back, and I'm sorry, you won't beat my record if you let me unique, Mr. Chairman. But, Tim, I'm not suggesting that you put a spin on any of the information. What I'm saying is we need to report the information very clearly as to what it means. So if a small river that runs through, you know, quite a significantly developed catchment and urban and a town at the same time, so Ashburton River has only got nitrates at the bottom of it at 1.1, and then the nitrates coming in together in Smith Stream at the top of the catchment is at 0.8. You know, it's not getting significantly contaminated on the way down. So what I'm asking for is actually a unbiased and scientific reflection on the state of the river, and that is that it actually meets 99% of the aquatic health standards, or whatever the number is. But the LAWA site says it's in the top 25% of degraded rivers in New Zealand. Well, of all sites not monitored. Of course, if you're monitoring a lot of rivers with a lot of sites, then I noticed that it's got the same nitrate rating as the boundary drain, where it's at 12 parts per million. 1 part per million, you end up in the same box as 12 parts per million. And to me, to help educate the population, that needs some that information needs some interpretation. Otherwise, we are distorting the message by not saying something about it. You get what I'm trying to say?
Good, Ian. I mean, thanks for that. I can hear your frustration, and you know, and this is a kind of a bigger issue in the sense of reporting and how things are covered. I know you said that you've got a lot of these papers. You can probably bring up the same issue on reporting on and how that. Oh no, but I mean, and how we project, and I mean that's a good question for us to take away, and I'm sure Kathleen and Tim are hearing that message. I suppose we can't sort it out here and now, but it's something for us to work on, and actually, is there a possibility to, look at all our braided rivers in a sense, and I know Councillor Egan is going to talk about reporting as well further on and how that looks like, but reporting in general for our rivers, and then what that looks like. Tim, okay, couple. Boy, Councillor Kinsey. Kia ora.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I made my points, and my point won't go away until I start to see if Tim and his team or whoever else is responsible reflect on some of those things.
Councillor Burns, is this the same issue or is something different?
And I'm just seeking some clarification. Certainly for the public, it's my understanding that we're not the only agency that reports on the health of rivers. For example, the medical officer of health and the issue of warnings issued earlier this year, I think February, on the Ashburton River in regards to not having people or dogs and the impact on human health. Is that right?
I can't talk exactly to the Ashburton River. I can't remember if that was the case, but the warnings that come out from the Ministry of Health, which in that case it could be around cyanobacteria, are from our monitoring, and then we have protocol that we work through, and because it's a health issue, it's the Ministry of Health or the Mātauranga that issues those warnings. So it's our monitoring, and they act upon that.
Sure, thank you. Kia ora, Councillor Swig, same issue? Something different? Okay, Councillor Egan and Councillor Swig.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just related to that item 10, item 12 as well. It's really important that we use science to inform our public, and I know that anecdotally people might think that their creek's okay, but the science potentially proves them wrong. So we can't sugarcoat things just because we don't like it. But I was just going to bring my comments about data generally in terms of this portfolio. We used to produce really, really good reports on a whole lot of indicators for environmental health, river health, ecosystem health, biodiversity health. And I just wondered where we're at with that. I'm referring to a Canterbury Water Management Strategy Target Report, June 2013. I think there's been others since then, but we just kind of seem a little bit, it would be good in my mind to have more information presented to us more often about the sorts of things that were included in those previous reports that we used to get. I'm thinking potentially lowland streams, those sorts of things, to understand where our monitoring sites actually are. Some of the maps that I'm looking at in this particular report, there doesn't seem to be a lot of monitoring sites in and around lower Ashburton and Selwyn districts, and I kind of was going to relate it to the report about the drought later on, and the effects, for example, of a low groundwater, and what the effects of nitrates, which presumably are still pouring into the groundwater, but the ability to be able to dilute that groundwater is dramatically reduced, and if that's followed up with monitoring sites that will pick that up. So it's those sorts of things that I'm kind of interested to hear about. Are we doing that? And
Kia ora, Grant. So Tim, comment on it.
Yes, there were several questions but there, and I'll try and answer them. I'm just looking at Cam in the back as well to do with that particular report, which is the CWMS targets report, which is is something that we now put on our website, and we update that around the Canterbury Water Management Strategy targets themselves, some of which include ecosystem health, but they include a much wider range of things as well. The reporting that we do takes varied forms. We've discussed LAWA, we put data directly onto LAWA. It's interpreted against the national standards. We report on against plan limits. We have reports that come out as, for example, for the regional policy statement, there's a lot of work being done around state of the environment and getting that into something that is easily digestible to be used for the development of policies in the regional policy statement. It's an ongoing process, and we do produce reports at various stages. Perhaps, Cam, do you want to comment on the CWMS targets?
Can you come to the table, please? Can't see you down there.
Thank you and good afternoon. Through you, Chair. So I'll talk quickly to the CWMS targets report, and it's 2025 is slated for the next update to the targets report. As Tim said, we are taking an online format. But I think what this kind of question points to in it all is how do we better get at kind of presenting this data, because there is, as Tim's pointed out, a number of different mechanisms, and as councillors will know, as we move into our 3 core services within the next year and the impact framework within that, we're thinking about how we better articulate to the community the outcomes that we want to achieve and how we're tracking towards those. And whilst we'll have some high-level outcomes, there is a need to actually be able to drill down to that. So that's something we're certainly thinking about as we prepare for the long-term plan and the shift to the core service and impact framework within that.
Yeah, thanks, Ken. I mean, it seems like in this particular report, lowland streams, a target for 2020 was to achieve the 60% of lowland lakes and streams being improved. And it was 5 years on. How do I know that is the case? And our monitoring, is it static, or usually you won't give an update on that until 2025?
That's correct. The last update was in 2021. What we've found with the targets reports in the past, as you'll know, there's a lot of different targets within there, and it's quite with a number of them, it's a qualitative process that you go through to actually assess those targets. So we're doing work of what best represents the trends that we're seeing and how do we best communicate that to the public. And so that's a conversation that we're having with we intend to have with the Mayoral Forum as owners of the CWMS, along with obviously their conversation around the future zone committee as well. But you did right, we need to be able to reflect and provide progress more frequently, but in a way that doesn't absolutely kind of tie ourselves up in knots and actually doing the reporting rather than actually doing the work to shift those trends.
Just a supplementary, probably, Tim, but getting back to the question of the actual monitoring sites. I mean, the maps in 2013 don't show many in an area that we know has a high nitrate levels in it. The Ashburton Selwyn communities. Am I wrong in that assessment, or is it just the way these maps don't show anything in terms of levels of analysis, ecosystem health and stuff like that? There's nothing that appears on these maps.
Well, I don't know that map in particular through Chair that, but I mean between the Rakaya and the Ashburton River, there are no lowland streams, so that would be one of the reasons why there's a large hole in that area. But I mean, we do have substantial monitoring done in the lowland streams that feed into and around Te Rahora, for example, in the Selwyn and in the Hines drains area further south. We also have extensive monitoring. So I think that I'm just not sure if that's a water quality or an ecosystem health, and doesn't matter in detail on that. But we do have a monitoring program that tries to be as representative as it can of all the different stream types that we have in the country.
So just on, Grant thought about reporting, etc. I mean, So in a sense of the science and reporting on a lot of stuff you mentioned before, how often do they come out and how are they shown? Because a lot of reports we won't see as councillors, right? So they were going to the website.
There are various means that that information is put out. There are reports that go onto the website. There's not many reports that are just kind of summarising the state. There is a groundwater report that does that, but there's not many that go on. The majority of the reporting that we're doing on sort of state of the environment are put out through mechanisms. So, for example, I talked about the RPS. That's put out through website channels and links that are linked into the work on the RPS. So that there are very different ways that these are produced.
So that state of the environment for the RPS, are they being done, completed, or being done?
I'm just going to look to either Teflon or Elaine to be able to answer that. And in particular around, I just don't quite know where they are, where you find them.
Through the chair, a lot of that information is now held in Power BIs, which are online tools that we can generate, information on a day exactly with using the most up-to-date information rather than long printed reports. And those are held on the website. When we launched the RPS and engagement with the community, as part of that, there was a website, if you remember, with water, and then it broke it down into the hill and high country, lowland streams and the coastal, with all the environmental and water quality data within that. I'm happy to share a link after this to the chair if that would be helpful to you.
So Elaine, that would be helpful. Thank you for that. Same issue, Councillor Mackay.
Just wish the George Council was attention to the website, because the CWMS progress reports there. For example, under the ecosystem health, which is one of the two targets, there's 8 areas underneath that, lowland streams and infrastructure. That's actually all there, Karakia, whether we've met, partially met or not met. So just encourage councillors to actually understand what.
Kia ora, Councillor Mackay, same issue, Councillor Franklin.
Just to point out that there is extensive monitoring in the lower part of the Solomon district as part of the CPW monitoring reports that I've signed off for the last 10 years. So groundwater, surface water, Tiwai Hora, it's all there, and those reports come into this council on an annual basis.
Oh, right. Sorry. Kia ora, Councillor Franklin, for that. Councillor Ward, same issue? No?
Oh, great. Well, I just take the feet and out to each is a lot, but just pour it into the water. That's not great.
Korua Koto, Councillor Southwood.
Just, I was looking at the report that I received from the PWMS targets report with here. And I remember the conversation around I think around when it was came through in 2021, and there was some discussion around having more spatial, because you have literally like one answer, one category for the whole of the Canterbury region on, say, wetlands, which you've got, which is way too inexplicit. Like it just, actually wants a lot of variation, and it would be really helpful. I know we had this conversation at the time, and I'm just wondering whether in the work you're doing, are you expecting to come back with the 2025 report with some more nuance around where is there, when we're looking at different parts and seeing in this area it's doing well, in that area not so well, and we actually get a bit more of a picture of Canterbury, because it's, I don't think it's not very helpful just to have it. I don't know how science does it. It's like lump it all together and go, oh, that gets green, that gets red. The whole of the region doesn't tell us much.
Through you, Chair. So we're planning the target support at the moment, what it's going to look like, and so I'll take their feedback. I wasn't here for the last one, so I was part of those conversations then. I know, obviously, we do a lot of spatial stuff. If you look at Lawa, for example, it's very kind of spatially orientated. And we can think about what else might be needed to support, particularly
the community understanding of where we're heading. Yeah. Okay, thanks for that. Councillor Mackenzie.
So just in terms of really just to follow on from John, there's a lot of monitoring going on of water quality, not only ECAM but also MHB has got a program in Plains, where I think it's 165 bores have been sampled on a monthly basis, bores and creek sites. So, the amount of information that's been collected is quite substantial. And one of the trends that you like to pick up, Grant referred to nitrates pouring into the ground. In a dry year like this, actually nitrates aren't pouring into the ground. So it's highly likely that in the spring, if the dry continues, you'll see a substantial drop in nitrates in the groundwater. And the monitoring we've done, that the MHB has done, has shown that a trend for dry years and a trend for wet years. Wet years, you tend to have much higher nitrates to start because of this pushing into groundwater. And the dry years, so you've got two different trend lines, which is good information. And
sorry, Councillor Mackenzie, cutting you off there.
I was just going to finish by saying Cam's dilemma will be how much of Tim's dilemma will be how much of this extra information which is collected from outside the UK enforcement system can they use to help populate outcomes under the CWA.
So my question for you, Councillor Mackenzie, how can we access that data?
So I'm not directly involved with the collection of the data, but that has been provided to ECAM. But there was some discussion as to whether the data has been delivered in a form that ECAM is happy with. So there's a bit of argy-bargy going on, and hopefully the two sides will come to a position where they trust each other enough to present and collect the data in a form that everybody's happy with. Is that fair?
Yeah, there's ongoing discussions around the data and how both parties can have faith and trust in the process in which that data is collected and used.
Yeah. Well, they're not good. So, Councillor Mackenzie, that's not on any public facing page.
Cam might be able to correct me here, but the individual data from the individual bores was being collected on a strictly private basis, and to set up the program in the first place, MHB signed an agreement with the individual bore owners and site owners to say that it was private information. There is generic information about the trends and everything. I think all that has been publicly presented at things like updates, the HH programs and those sorts of things. So the trends in the data, the gross data is available, where the individual bore data is not available. Okay. Is that right, Jeff?
Through you, Chair, I'm not 100% sure on the specifics, but I guess the broader point is that there's a truckload of information out there, and so we're keen to use much of it as possible, but noting the limitations that Councillor Mackenzie talked to and actually kind of making sense of it, putting it out in a useful way.
Sure, Cam, thanks for the clarification. With Councillor Ward and Councillor Twiggs, and then that's it on this item.
I think to state before that in some areas in South Canterbury are seen with wiser zoning committees and the catchment group committees, and a lot of those focused for outgoing blind board meetings. So I think there's a lot more information coming over as well.
Cam said there's lots of data out there. It's how we get it and to use it as well and present it. Thanks for that, Cam. And then Councillor Twiggs.
First part will be a comment. I actually think that listening to the conversation, Mr. Chair, I believe that the council may need a citizen-led data strategy, which is not a stupid thing to think about. My question, coming back to the paper and actually what's in it and around the financial, the question that I have is, I note that it's going to the risk and finance, and it might be more you, Tim, to answer it. Is there any deliverable risks, like on the work program for the whole year? Like, are you being able to deliver everything that we've got in the budget? Basically, no understanding.
through you, Chair, the finances came to the executive leadership team this Monday, and from recollection, because I do look at the water and land portfolio in particular, that it is to forecast, and that the deliverables are reported on here, and that is that we are expecting to be as forecast, which is under budget. So the forecast is under budget.
Anything else, Councillor? Well, the motion is on page 17. So we'll put the motion there. That the Water and Land Committee received. Oh, thank you, Linda and Ken. May leave the table. Thank you both. Tēnā korua. That the Water and Land Committee receives the work program report for the quarter 3, 2024 for the Water and Land portfolio. Move, Councillor Korako, seconder, Councillor Mackay. Any discussion? Recorded all. Oh, therefore, all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? None. Carried. Well done. 8.3 has been moved to the back end, so we can wait for David O'Connell to arrive. Therefore, we'll move on to 8.4, and we'll invite Judith to the table, please. And we have a presentation. Oh, and Dan, sorry. Oh, yeah, Dan Clark, our senior scientist in hydrology. Kia ora.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Thanks for the opportunity to talk to this paper, which was authored by Dan Olican, who's not here today, but pulled together different parts of the business to give you some visibility around the impact of drought and the dry conditions we've been having both on our environment and in our community. So we've prepared this. Dan's got a little bit of a presentation of April data just to bring it up, given when we put the paper together, we didn't have that information. I'll give him, but I just have a correction to make, and it relates to the wrong use of terminology by myself. So just to be clear, remember that when we adverse events like drought they're classified by MPI versus declared. So it's a bit of a jargon point to just correct, but it is the one that's actually should have been in the paper, and I should have put that. So it's so 0.3 there, medium scale drought was classified in Canterbury. Should be the correction here. It would be great if we reported in somehow. But do you want to run through it? So apart from that, we'll take it as read. The recommendation is that you receive the update on drought conditions in Canterbury and our response to these. But we'll let Dan run through his presentation, and happy to answer questions. We'll do the microphone dance at the same time.
Thank you, and kia ora koutou. We prepared this paper looking at all the March data, and when we were writing it, we were pretty much right in the start of a quite large rainfall event. So it's an opportunity today to talk through what has changed since we wrote the paper, and give you kind of the most up-to-date information we've got in terms of what the region is looking like hydrologically at the moment. So I'll start with just highlighting the fact that we did have this reasonably significant rainfall event in mid-April. You would have seen flooding in the news quite a bit, particularly in the large alpine rivers. You'll see on the right-hand side, we've got a plot that came from NIWA showing what they call rainfall anomaly, which is basically how does the rainfall that had fallen to mid-April compared to what would be average for that time of year. And the colours that are kind of blue through green are wetter than normal, and the orange to red colours are drier than normal. And you can see that there was a significant amount of wetter than normal conditions in the southwest of the country, spreading into parts of southwest Canterbury and the alpine catchments. It's also worth noting this drier area in northeastern Christchurch, and you'll see that turn up a little bit more in some of the plots I talk about a bit later. So just to highlight how much rainfall we got half a metre in some catchments. So the upper Rakaya river catchment We got 1/2 metre of rainfall, and that resulted in a flood of a bit over 2,000 cubics. So just in context, that's what we would class as about a mean annual flood. So that's the flood with the magnitude we expect to see on average in a given year. And looking at some of the other rivers, the Waimakariri River didn't get as high a flood. It was much less than the mean annual flood. And then also the Rangitata River, we saw again a significant flood, and you would have seen that one in the news. But again, it was close to a mean annual flood, but not quite that level. And we did see rain across much of the catchment, much of the region, but lesser amounts on the foothills and the plains. And just noting on that, as we went into that event, it was pretty dry, and we had most people on irrigation restrictions prior to the event. People generally had those restrictions eased for a short period, but we've returned back to those low levels. And the next few maps are just updates for the maps that are in the paper. And these highlight how things have changed a little bit since we wrote the paper. This first one highlights rainfall at our monitoring sites across the region. And previously in March, we saw a lot of lower rainfall recordings in much of the region. Following the rainfall event in April, we see a lot of green dots, which represent more average rainfall totals. It's worth noting that most of that rain fell during those few days in mid-April. So that was enough to bump up the averages, but it was for a short duration, not necessarily average rainfall across the duration of the month. So the next one. And then looking across to what does this actually mean for flow monitoring? So like the plots in the paper, we've got the median flow percentile. So this gives you an idea of how our monitoring in the month compares to the long-term average for the month of April. And again, the red and orange ones are the ones that are drier than normal. The green ones are the ones that are average. And what you'll see is there's still a large number of sites across the region, particularly across the foothills, that are still in this red, very low category. So while we did see a significant amount of rain for a short period of time, we're still seeing some pretty dry conditions. And just to round out the picture on our monitoring, this one isn't in the original paper, but I've included it to provide a bit more context. This is a map of our groundwater monitoring sites, monitoring groundwater levels. And this uses the same sort of scale where the red and lighter red dots are below average for this time of year. And you can see that there's a large number of red dots across quite a large area of Canterbury. And this one also has a quite handy pie chart in the bottom corner that shows you the proportions of all the sites we're monitoring. And you can see from that chart in the bottom right-hand corner that over half of the sites we're monitoring would be classed as low or very low for groundwater levels.
Mr. Chair, if I might, given the conditions across the plain, certainly the eastern parts of Canterbury are still very dry, and irrigation and warm and irrigation is still going on. How much is that like when you're comparing this map to previous years? But in previous years, if what we know is as soon as you stop irrigating, groundwater levels will come up. And so other years in April, most Aprils there's no irrigation, limited irrigation. This year it's substantial amount of irrigation. How much is that distorted the picture? So if you did those dots today, where the irrigation had turned off, would you see less red dots?
We haven't done that analysis, but you do make a very valid point that this season we have seen people irrigating for longer than we might have in seasons that the rain came earlier. So it would be something we could look at, but we haven't done that yet. If I go on to the next slide, this kind of ties it all together a wee bit more. This is some information that NIWA publishes on their hotspot watch, which highlights areas where we're seeing very low soil moisture, and also what they produce a drought index, which combines a number of variables. And these maps show similar things to what we saw with that rainfall map, and also with our own monitoring, that in March we were seeing South Canterbury significantly drier than North Canterbury, whereas now we're getting the April data included. We're starting to see a shift where coastal North Canterbury is getting to be quite dry. I acknowledge that there's still some parts, particularly in some of the foothills of South Canterbury, that it's still pretty dry. But we have had a bit of a shift in the distribution of the wetter and drier parts of the region in the last month. If we just go to the last slide, just to update on the latest outlook. So this again has come from NIWA, and because we included one in the paper, it seems relevant to update this, including the latest month. And you'll see there that the outlook is for the El Nino conditions to ease later in May. But it's also important to note that we're likely to see warmer conditions, lower or average, so lower rainfall, and also lower soil moisture and river flows. So we're likely to see conditions like we're seeing now continue for a bit longer, and how winter goes will influence how we start next season. It's probably an important point to finish on. And then the question.
Kia ora, Kuro, thank you for that. Thank you for clarification, Councillor.
So, on that last point that you were talking about, an important part obviously is the equation for our soil moisture and winter for snow melt. Has there been any prediction on the potential snow with the changing weather systems that we're seeing?
There are overall projections from NIWA's climate change modelling that do talk about there being more precipitation falling as rainfall rather than snow through winter, which is likely to change the distribution of flows. For example, you might get higher flows during winter and lower flows during spring, early summer, where currently it's relying on a lot of snowmelt. So that's what the projections look like.
So just on that, obviously this is a very dry season after a couple of medium, not so dry. But what would be the cumulative effects if we get low snowfall? They're predicting another El Nino, not always supposed to stuff come in the next season. What would be the cumulative effects of what we see on the groundwater?
So that's a very important point. We've seen multiple dry seasons before that have occurred consecutively, so that gives us an indication of what we might see next season or the season after if we don't get large amounts of recharge this year. You might recall in kind of the 2015, 16, 17 seasons, we had multiple years where it was quite dry and lower than normal recharge. And that was at the end of the 2017 season was when we saw some really low flows, particularly around the lower Central Plains area, around Te Waihora. We saw the lowest recorded flow in the Selwyn River. That was following multiple dry seasons. So you would expect if we got dry winters with less recharge, we would continue to see dry conditions next season.
Yeah, firstly, just on the median flow percentile image that you had, I just noticed there didn't seem to be anything sort of higher. It's like one low spot that they're going somewhere between the Karakia and Tuahara, but
we were having a discussion about that. So this is using the monitoring that ECAN does. We didn't manage to incorporate the monitoring that DEWA has on the Rapaya River in this plot. So we do have that data, but we just weren't able to get it in this plot.
hopefully you'll look at that. It's quite an important river in our region. And then in terms of the later on, you talk about looking at sort of balancing environmental and economic needs for decision making, and in response to the comment later on again about the climate change impacts or effects that we're sort of expecting to see more frequent droughts and so on. And I know we've got an in-house working group starting to look at this, and just interested to know how are we thinking around. Are we looking at having to build in more capacity to accommodate these dry periods? And that is both, somehow, I guess the crux of the problem is how do we ensure that we have got the built-in resilience for our rivers to cope with those dry, low seasons, which we expect to be more frequently, at the same time as we're expecting to see or need for irrigation if that's what we're going to continue with. But actually, how do you cut that? Because it's, there's only so much water, and with that potential evaporation, dryness in the soil across the region, that longer term again will reduce the amount of recharge from our aquifers, I think. So how do we balance all that up? I mean, that's a huge question. What are we doing, and how is that going to play out? And I can see tensions in there, and I know it gets said, oh, just build more storage, but actually I think the volumes we're talking about here are enormous in an ever-decreasing rainfall opportunity. So what's happening with that?
Yeah, I think it's a good question, and I think in preparing this paper, it really highlighted the need to have some of those conversations internally and thinking of, we've got a model of water allocation, that comes, and how much is that sort of future proofed in. We've got a community who is, our rural community are used to having to plan for dry conditions. It's not without the realm of understanding, and some are, the anecdote this year from the engagement with the rural advisory group that was set up was a lot that this year some of the areas that have struggled with have been planning for drought are the ones that actually have traditionally had access to irrigation to save the day. So that building resilience even within those schemes or arrangements. So there is a little bit of everyone's got a role to play here, but we're really interested in looking at what is that for us across both the regulatory space, but also our support and connection with the community. So it's a work in progress.
Got a few to think for that, Councillor Wood.
I'm not saying that we need to dam every river, but we need to start thinking about more water storage, not just for the rural communities, but also for counterparts as we face these times of limited amount of water going forward.
Councillor Davis.
Just in light of what has been said around water levels and nitrate concentration, have we done any statistical analysis related to water quality parameters and precipitation?
I think on that we'll have to look into what we've done and give you a more full answer. Okay.
Good, thank you. Councillor Robinson.
Thanks for that. It's always very interesting talking about this. My probably question or query is regarding water allocation, and you said we've got a model for this, but I imagine that's for people who already have consent to use water and irrigation. What about new consents being considered in an environment where there is obviously a drought. And I guess allocation of that particular scenario, is that being looked at? And as a supplement on top of it, are we reviewing current consents and extractions under this one?
I'll start us off here. So when allocation limits are set, we consider a longer term climate, and there is consideration of climate change. We don't necessarily set them particularly for one particular year. So there is, when we allocate water and when we grant water for consent, there is an acknowledgement that the allocation that people are given is sufficient for 9 years out of 10. So in that, it's acknowledged that people won't necessarily have the volume of water for every single year. And this would be one of those examples where we would expect demand to be very high. So yeah, when we set overall limits, it's kind of a longer term climate consideration.
I guess the question relating to when we review or look at, so there will be, for new applicants, there will maybe no water to allocate, so you can't give any a consent. That exists in parts of our region already, and there's areas where our planning framework has clearly indicated that we will be looking to reduce some of that allocation where it's over allocated. So that's the when consents are up for renewal, and also transfer process and potentially the review process. Right. So that's that adjusting point. Yeah.
Thanks for the clarification, Councillor. Thanks for the presentation. I'm really keen to get more information about the relationship between rainfall, low flows, irrigation takes, groundwater levels, and the effect of all of that on especially groundwater, the health of the groundwater and the organisms within the groundwater. I suppose it's something, Chair, that we could look at, or the committee could look at another time in terms of providing some more comprehensive interrelationships between these things. I'm thinking especially too of presumably surface water takes at the moment are not allowed. So the water that is irrigation water is from wells, depleting the existing groundwater to maintain agriculture. And so that would be interesting to see, do we have limits on those takes? Or are we allocating too much? What's the corresponding effect on the flows of rivers, lowland rivers and springs? You know, it's those interrelationships that are compounding on the effects of the environment that I would find really useful to know. But look, and thanks for your information. And obviously, as Councillor Southwell suggested, there's some big gaps in your maps on the Rakaya, Rangitata, and about where they are. But if they all remember, it's good to have that on the, so we get the full picture related to those member maps. My question on this report, we commented generally on the report, was the item 17 on the top of page 32. I mean, I know people obviously under stress, but the inference here in that particular item was that there's potentially likely to be trade-offs in terms of looking at the regulatory decisions around water availability, ecosystem health, animal landowner welfare, And I just wondered what's meant by the word trade-offs. Trade-offs and what?
Kia ora, through the chair. Look, so this is that point where at times we have to make very pragmatic decisions that balance short-term immediacy versus, but also balancing that with environmental harm and degradation. So a real example of this would be the supply of stock water in a catchment, the stream has dried up and alternative stock water is needed. How do we enable that? Otherwise, we've got an animal welfare issue as well. So what's the pragmatic solution? And our communication with the industry in this space and farmers and kids and Rural Sport Trust has been, let us know when these issues occur. Tell us, we'll work with you. But it's short term. It's knowing something needs to be different to fix a problem, but it's balancing that not ongoing environmental harm is occurring. So that's just an example of balancing those things.
What do you want to do? Oh, just so that's what 48 you have internal staff working group, and so is that where you kind of work in with the rural support group, or?
Sorry, well, I was just referring to I think paragraph 17 is the one that the trade-off. Okay. Sorry. So we've been involved for the rural support group as part of seeding. And that's involved in when adverse events are occurring. Now, when it comes to obviously floods, its Environment Canterbury has a much bigger role to play. When it comes to the adverse effects around pest incursions, another one, but around drought, this is where MPI leads, and they lead that mainly from managing animal welfare. So seeding, when in this issue where I got asked to participate with my regulatory hat on the discussion rather than Lee sits on that with her role in field services with the CDM office, if you like. So that's why I was brought in, because these real issues were occurring. So how do we support a farmer around it? So that's using, I guess, our normal approach we would use when confronting an issue of a black and white. You could argue it's non-compliance, breach of a rule, but actually, what's the pragmatic solution given a short-term fix is needed, and it's an extreme out of somebody's control issue versus something they've done themselves.
The trade-off information comes through you.
So the support, that's the conversation we're having. So staff, if they've identified an issue or become aware, are escalating it to their managers. So it's usually in a compliance space. Yeah.
Look, I understand that. I suppose for us then, given climate change and those maps, that we're going to see this pattern presumably increasing over time of drought. And the issue of a stream or a water race drying up, I don't know where the water's coming from, whether it's from the river and the low flow can't get into it, or whether groundwater is not bubbling up and filling it. Or where it's coming from, but wherever it's coming from, presumably we're analysing that as part of our assessment of what caused this. Is it over allocation? In which case, going forward, how easy is it for us to put a halt to restrictions on allocations from people's wells because we're actually allowing too much water and it's having an effect downstream? I mean, is that something we look at?
I'll quickly go through that. The way that we allocate water is we have surface water takes, we have groundwater takes, and we have this bit in between, which is the hydraulically connected. And they're the ones that it's a modelled approach, but it takes some pretty robust modelling, and it's able to say that groundwater directly affects that stream. Now, if anybody's in that state, then they are on similar, if not the same restrictions as if they were a surface water take. The groundwater takes are managed in a different way, and so these are further away from the stream, and that's when we're using things like annual volumes, which have been brought in because it's a much longer time lag of what's happening. And it's quite common during a drought like this, that the annual volume are used up, and people can no longer, particularly towards the tail end of the season, they can't use all of it. They can't continue irrigating.
Jonathan, thanks for that. Same point, Councillor.
Yeah, I think, Jim, what you said is absolutely right. I think what you've got to remember is this year wasn't a drought in the sense across the whole of the climate. We're overstating the situation. We had a really good, we had plenty of rainfall up until Christmas. The high country was really dry, and then it's dried out. And that drought has affected hill country in South Canada, North Canada, more than it's affected the plains. If the drier than average season continues into next year, then seasonal allocations may come under stress in terms of people using their full allocation. But I don't know if anybody this year has come to anywhere close to using their full groundwater allocation this year, because we didn't do much irrigating before Christmas. So we just need to balance this out. In the history of droughts in Canterbury, this has been just a minor teapot. We could be lining up for a humdinger of a drought next year if the dry continues.
Just comment, and absolutely agree. And Dan and I were talking about this earlier this morning around how it compares to previous years. And one of the things is that it was reasonably well, it wasn't that dry leading up to Christmas. There'd been a good amount of recharge last year, and in fact, I can remember putting in doing some reporting through to you as councillors around what the impact of El Nino might be, and that was towards the end of last year, and it has almost turned out exactly as it was, which is the hill country areas really suffering. The lower, and you can see it in these flow percentiles, the lowland streams, because the groundwater levels were quite high going into it, have held up quite well. If this continues on into next year, that's when they could be quite severe.
And as Dan presented before, like, if we don't get the recharge, the snowfall, as the Councillor Swig mentioned, then next year, and the council will be hunting, as Councillor McKenzie said.
And the recharge to groundwater relies on rain. Very little of it reflects on snow, unless you get snow across the ground. The snow in the backcountry doesn't recharge the groundwater under the plain.
Councillor Ward, same issue, otherwise Councillor Karakia. Hi, Councillor Karakia. Can I just, with all of this discussion, so I want to know really in some ways around the motive of the river, because okay, you talk about drought and all that, and we understand the Rakauri actually would be probably a really good example of it, because up in the headwaters it's still got water in it, and then it actually goes down into aquifers. So it actually doesn't get to the upper or the mouth of the river. And we understand that, because it's not as if drought, it's just sort of kind of happened because of climate change, so forth thing. What is difficult to understand is that, and how it changes, and this is my question, is that is Manawhenua on the right track to say that when you continue to take water, from the rivers and then from the aquifers, that it does upset the whole mode, the whole life force of the river? Is that correct? Is that your understanding?
So we acknowledge that the groundwater is all connected. So that's why, as Tim mentioned, we have rules around surface water and groundwater interactions. So particularly, Tim mentioned what we call stream depleting groundwater takes, which are those takes that, if they turn on or off, you would expect to see some change in the river within a short duration of time. The other aspect is more the total allocation side of things, which Tim talked about, annual volumes. So when we're considering those, we consider them as a cumulative effect. So kind of this ongoing impact that won't necessarily change if people turn on or off at a given time, but just have this continual lowering effect on a water body they have to be connected to. So when we set those limits, we do consider the overall effect on neighbouring rivers. So treating it as a whole system.
One other question around a specific part of the paper, and it's on page 40, number 54. What does that mean in regards to engagements, the applicants, and Māori participation?
Yes, so that's heading standard for all papers that come to your council. So I've highlighted in this regard that the engagement we've been doing is in relation to Royal Advisory Group. We have not engaged or involved Māori participation.
So there's no, around this, there's no significant or any engagement with Māori. Is that what you're saying?
And looking at our response to Drought now. That, yes, that's what I'm saying. There's been no engagement.
Sure, look on that, on number 39, it says the El Nino Working Group in Mātauranga is on that. How is that information from ECAN go to that group?
So there's a couple of groups that ECAN staff are involved in. That El Nino working group was one of them. So we had staff give presentations with similar sort of information to what I've shown today for that working group. But that's particularly from a scientific aspect of us giving an update on conditions in Canterbury.
Thanks. Do you know who from Mātauranga who's on that group?
No, I don't. Sorry.
Can we find out? And let Councillor Karakia and myself know about that. They'll help us. If there's no more discussions, nothing else. Thank you, Judith. Thank you, Dan, for your comments today. That was a good paper.
That was questions, wasn't it?
The Water and Land Committee received the update on drought conditions in Canterbury and the Council's response to these. Moved by Councillor Mackay, seconded by Councillor Twiggs. Would you like to have a comment now, Councillor Mackay?
Thank you very much. Thanks for the paper and the presentation. I think I agree with Councillor McKenzie. I think by and large where there has been some irrigation, even though from February I think parts of North Canterbury has certainly been under pretty severe restrictions. And even the irrigated land is quite compromised now. The crops are around 50% yield. Our dry land in North Canterbury, and particularly further up the coast of North Canterbury, and certainly down in Mackenzie country and some of the other country in there is in a really bad state. I am particularly concerned. I'm already hearing reports of concern from our landowners around animal welfare and also mental health of our rural families. So this is quite serious. Thanks for bringing it forward, and I just hope that fellow councillors here understand the gravity of this, particularly given history. I think in terms of high possibility that the impact will be really negative.
The other Councillor Mackay, thank you for that. Councillor Twiggs, any comments now? Councillor Karakia, do you want to hold your comment? Okay, Councillor Karakia.
Well, also just leading on around wellbeing, that is exactly, if you want to look at Mana Whenua's view and their wellness, actually, when they see the responses around with drought and all of that around their mahi makai. Again, I come back to the Rakaudi, which is dry actually at the moment. So it's also not only our farming fraternity, but it's also mana whenua as well that really feel it. And they've felt it for quite some time. And again, it actually comes to that balance. Yeah.
Yeah, just an observation. I think it's great that we are aware of, issues impacting upon a section of our community. But I would presume that's standard practice across with all of our engagement accounts, different communities, especially now given that we're in a huge change economically across the country with large numbers of people being made unemployed. We're also in a technical recession, so I would presume again that's just how we operate across the board. Is that a fair comment to make?
Hey, we've done our questions, Councillor Burns. So
well, as a comment, I'll make it as a comment. We should be ensuring that we are covering all of our communities across it. I would imagine, and without downplaying the mental health risks for our rural community, I'd imagine people losing their jobs with heavy mortgages in a technical recession, whether you be Māori, Karakia or any other, would be just as traumatic.
thank you, Councillor Burns, for that comment. Councillor Wigg.
Just a quick comment, really. I mean, this highlights, it does highlight climate change and the effects of climate change, and the reluctance, well, not reluctance, the need to diversify our land use activity and provide more bespoke solutions to fit in with land types. And encourage investment in other areas so that our farmers who have monocultures, for example, are not left in the lurch because of shortage of water, and our environment is not compromised in the same way with overuse of water to support industry or whatever that possibly that requires excess water in favour of land use activity that has less water usage. That's what I like to say.
Councillor Robinson.
I just want to say, in this situation, I think it's just a good time to really have a good look at the way in which we consent and grant allocations of water, how we still permit the activity of transfers of consents. And we just really need to keep reassessing and saying no to some of the consents that really just don't fit the future of our region anymore. We just need to be brave. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Southwood.
I was also going to comment on the planning aspect. So really interesting. I love seeing these types of reports. There's data there, lots of maps, pictures that tell a story, and it's a little window. I feel like this is really a window into our future, accepting that it could be a whole lot worse. Let's hope it isn't a whole lot worse next year. But I think it's really like it's the canary in the coal mine. We need to be really starting to look, and I know through our RPS and then the subsequent integrated planning framework, and the time will come to assess, what's appropriate in terms of land use activity, consent. Is there an opportunity for more storage, but whilst being sensitive to the ecosystem, and how do we balance it all? I mean, that's the big topic, isn't it, for us as a region? And so I look forward to that. But thank you for the paper. It's fun for me. Thank you.
Sure, Councillor Southwood.
I just wanted to thank the staff for what they've said around the responsiveness of when we have events like what we're having, given some of the situations we faced. I think it's a pragmatic approach that we will be taking, and I appreciate that. I think it's hard to manage these things if you come up with some very difficult, different, divergent views on these issues. But I think taking a pragmatic approach is something that perked my ears up, and I just wanted to say thanks for bringing that to us. And I understand that it hasn't been an easy time, so just appreciate that. And I do think that I just wanted to. The canary in the coal mine for this was actually, I think, that what we said was actually back in 2015, 16, 17, was when you get the cumulative things. That's what I'm really interested in. So I'm really going to be looking at sort of understanding how snow, that's going to be the big thing. How much snow is it? How time is getting warmer to get snow? What are the cumulative effects? How do they affect snow? This is an ongoing piece of work, but it's been thanks. I just really wanted to say that. I appreciate the work that's going on.
Kia ora tātou, councillors. Thank you for your discussion, and I kind of really take Councillor Mackay and Councillor Koraku's point regarding our well-being of our rural community and kind of making sure we understand that as a whole of the council and our staff, and listen to Judith's comments and working together and kind of how to make sure we can navigate our way through that. And as Councillor Swiggs summed up perfectly at the end there, and being pragmatic, and also Councillor Koraku making sure we remember about our Māori of our streams and also our access to our mana whenua regarding Makai and what that means and how we move forward with that to make sure that is not compromised as well. So kia ora councillors for your great discussion, and also for the staff for a great paper to bring us up to date where we are inside the so we have this we have our recommendation here on the paper on the screen. We had Councillor Mackay move, Councillor Swiggs second it. All those in favour please say aye. Any against? None. Carried. Kia ora. Moving on to 8.5, summary of the recreational bathing season, and we will ask Dr. Elaine Moriarty to the table, please. Please take the paper as read. Any points you'd like to highlight there, Elaine?
Kia ora and through you, Chair. Thank you very much. No, this is just a very short summary of our summer recreational season, and of note there was 1,796 water samples collected and processed through our scientists, and they came from 111 sites all across Canterbury from our rivers and lakes. So it was also the first summer where we were available to collect a water sample and process it all over the Christmas break. You remember we had difficulties with that before, but this summer we changed and we're open and available for that. So all my like to say on that for now. If anyone has any questions.
Questions, clarification? Councillor Leach.
Just quickly, that the annual report that you'll produce in September, will that actually list the rivers and show, identify them where they are?
Through you, Chair, yes, that report will be far more detailed. In it, we do the gradings, if you remember from another year, where we grade them on 5 years worth of data. So that analysis typically happens over the winter period, and then we release those results as soon as we can prior to the bathing season 24-25.
Councillor Foreman. I was just wondering your thoughts on, like reading through the results. It's really interesting that the bacterial stuff seems to be lessening as an issue, but the cyanobacteria stuff. Have you got any thoughts on that?
Through the Chair, this was a dry summer as we approached, obviously, prior to that. And when it doesn't rain significantly, we tend to get lower bacterial counts because we're not getting as much overflow events from our stormwater discharge. We're not getting as much runoff from our catchments down into our beaches. So that would be a reason for that. We still had a few events and we targeted them, but with the cyanobacteria then is the flip side of that, whereby cyano is a really complicated bacteria where there's no single one driver for it. It doesn't like, if the water is moving a lot, it doesn't like it. So if you have a nice, stable, stagnant water body, with elevated temperatures and nitrates potentially in it is an issue, and they can lead to increased cyanobacteria alerts, which we have at the moment.
And I just wanted to raise, like last week in the hearings for the LTP, we heard one similar, and I just wanted to just about the connection with cyanobacteria to other diseases. Motor neuron was mentioned. Have you ever heard anything in relation to that?
No, I'm sorry, but I can look. I can check in with Cawthorne on that and get back to you, Councillor Pauling.
Sure, thank you for that. Yeah, that's going to be my question as well. But Councillor Pauling covered that. So yeah, one splitter, and we did say we'll follow it up. We will, Councillor Sutherland.
Yeah, no, you mentioned about there being 27 coastal sites that were resampled, including some that were graded 4, because normally we don't resample sites at 4 because they would not suitable for swimming. Is that related to the development of a model to predict? Is that what that's about?
Yeah, sure. Through the chair, we resampled some of the coastal sites, and you may remember we spoke about wanting to develop a predictive model. So what we would hope with this model, reflecting on the experience of our councils in Wellington and Auckland, that we could use metadata such as our rainfall and wind, tidal conditions, any of those kind of parameters, that we could use them to predict water quality. So, particularly in our more urban beaches, such as Cass and Corsair, Akaroa, all around Whakakapi Harbour. So that work is ongoing at the moment, and we did go out, the team went out and took a lot more samples this summer in 4 beaches to see could we get more data and then connect it with what's happening in the environment. I'm happy the progress on the model to date, but it will be, I would say 12 months before I could come back to you and, walk you through a model.
Okay. Councillor Sunday.
Yeah, I was going to ask the question, are you seeing any trends? It kind of sounds like you're seeing what you would expect in a dry year on one end and a dry year on the other. That's a reasonable summary.
It is, and the data is raw at the moment. The analysis in terms of trends, and are we seeing changes in our rivers? Are we seeing different grades? What's improving? What's going down? That all comes out in our annual report, which I said would hopefully be around September, all those grades. And that is shared as well on Lawa, on Rivers Day on Lawa. What's 26th-ish of September? It's released for the whole country.
Thank you for that, Councillor Davis.
And is there any relationship between these sites and our surface water sites, or is it quite different?
Most of these are, you mean between our SOE sites, our state of the environment sites, and these sites? Yes, there is. So some of these sites may well be part of our SOE that would continue over the winter period once a month. Yes.
So just to follow on from that, through Chair, the contact recreation sites are chosen from community feedback, and particularly with territorial authorities, on where people swim, and that's what it really concentrates on, where people swim. Now, coincidentally, that is quite often where we do state environment monitoring, but they're not. They don't line up exactly.
Good. So just to clarify, because I see the engagement that you have with Mana Whenua, and you just talked about swimming, but also Mana Whenua is not only about swimming, I mean it's also about the mahi o kai. So does that come into it? It must have.
Through Chair. Yes, it does. We have sites that we monitor for shellfish gathering as well, and those typically are sites where recreational contact monitoring happens as well. There's a slightly different bacteria you look for that, but yes, it does, and they will all be reported in September.
Can I just one supplementary thing, because the interesting thing here, because at the submissions last week, I'm just doing a comparison here. We heard about flammable trees and recession plains about shade. You can shade your neighbour, but you can't shade your neighbour, but you can burn your neighbour by planting a tree. The same thing here is about you can go swimming, okay, or you can't go swimming, but you can eat the kaimoana. That is. But my question is that if it was unfit for swimming, surely it would be unfit actually for collecting and eating kaimoana.
Yes. George, yes, a lot of our sites are like that, and we have warnings there. At the start of the season, we meet with Mana Whenua within that rungi and discuss the results and discuss how they would like the information shared and publicised. So typically, if a site is unsuitable for swimming, it would be unsuitable for shellfish collection.
Good, Council Koraka. It can be the other way though. You can have a site that you can't gather kai, but you still swim. Yeah. Yeah, that's probably, yeah. Okay. No more further comments. Thank you for that, Lane. You can leave the table now. Thank you. We'll put the resolution up on the screen on page 42. Yeah. Well, wait. Okay, take that. You can read that on the screen. Councillor Davies will move. Seconder, Councillor Southworth. Open up for any comments. If you'd like to speak to it, Councillor Davies, Councillor Southworth, any comments?
Just look forward to the final report, and it's been a good summer and well done on especially sorting out that monitoring and testing over Christmas and so on. So thank you for that.
Any other?
Yeah, I just look forward to this time next year. They could not be on the list because ECAN has decided to allow the lake to revert to healthy habitat.
All right, no more comments. Councillor Robinson.
Just for clarity, there is actually some sort of citizen science input for swimmable water, isn't there? Sorry, I don't know if I'm directing that correct.
No more questions. You just a comment, so we can. Yeah, I'll pick it up. We'll pick it up. Otherwise, the motion's been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, none. Carried. Filter. So back to 8.3. We have 15 minutes. Otherwise, we'll move the motion to extend to 3:15. Okay, I'll move the motion now. We'll move to 3:15. Moved by Councillor Byrne, seconded by Councillor Tucker. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Filter. Carried. We have 23 minutes. David Perenata O'Connell. Kia ora. No tua. Kia ora. Tēnā koe te tiamana. Koutou katoa. Pai kaunihira. Thank you for this opportunity. And first and foremost, I do want to, I'm not sure Alex has been introduced to councillors. So Alex Greaves has recently joined the two-year team in strategy as a principal advisor. Has come to us from Galloway Cook. Alan? No. Price. Oh, sorry.
Kia ora tātou. Yeah, my name's Alex Greaves. Prior to this, I've been practicing law in a variety of roles, but immediately prior was an employed barrister at Walker Street Chambers doing litigation.
And is Norm Rai to a huri.
So turning to the paper, just a brief intro. As outlined in the paper, this is one of the first times that we've started to bring together the Mātauranga work streams, the various activities across the organisation into this report. It's something that over the last or quite a number of years now has tended to happen runanga by runanga, and as opportunities have presented themselves. So quite often they are quite project focused and have come out of either doing kaitiaki type projects or other initiatives. There's been the opportunity to build Mātauranga monitoring into those. We've also, as part of plan development in the past, there's been a lot of cultural Mātauranga monitoring as part of informing those plans. But really for quite a long period we haven't had a program per se. That's really the focus we're shifting to, and we're picking up and in active conversations with Mahanui Karakia and with about to meet with Aoraki Environmental to look at bespoke programs for Mātauranga Māori that aren't just project by project based, but actually follow similarly to what you've seen as the bathing standards and monitoring sites, how we get more consistent and regular information. So working with the Papatapu Runanga entities and them working in turn with their runanga to develop those programs. So we're really looking forward. The work with Mahanui is getting underway now, so we're really looking forward to that program approach emerging over the next year. And that could be taken questions. Thank you for that. And clarification, caught up with
O tēnā kūrua, mi ati kā koe o te whanaunga o tuahuriri mana, tuahuriri tangata mi ati. Just probably the first question is that, so we are actually definitely, not that we possibly weren't, but there was a feeling that we were, taking Mātauranga Māori seriously within the whole kind of confines of what, like, there's so many different sort of times that we've actually sat there and listened to examples, say, Otu Wharekai, and then there's the science, and then there is the kind of Mātauranga, which actually we kind of understood what it was. We did anyway, but there was always a kind of grey area. So this is where this is going. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. Moving it towards more of a program and less, I guess, reactionary to examples like Otu Wharekai, where the issue emerges. Actually, the Mātauranga is contributing to the emerging issue and informing, is there an issue before we actually land here? But at the moment, Otu Wharekai is, you could say, is a bit like the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff, where the issue has emerged, and now the cultural monitoring is starting to take place. We should have had that Mātauranga basis to inform the decision making prior. So that's where we're looking to move towards.
Can I have just one supplementary? It's more of an observation, or a question actually, no question. Because in number 19, you've got this name actually. And the reason why I looked at this, because I have a very good Sudanese friend. I don't know, where did you get the name Longairo?
Aku e whakautu. Io Ngairo is Jamal Morgan gave that name to Survival Canterbury to use, and he got that from Hautemara, Ngai Tuhoi, in a sense. So when Papatuanuku and Ranginui split, the connection between the water and land, so to speak, was called Io Ngairo, and that's where the name comes from.
I understood the the relationship between Papatuanuku and Paparo. I mean, depending who you talk to, where you come from, side of the husband or the son. But it was just the way it was written here that because I looked at it because it's Eeyore and then second word. I'm sorry, it's only probably semantics, but just looking at it, I do, but no.
The kupu, gifted by Jamal to the project. So, yeah.
I'm sorry, but I don't know as much as
Turi, Hari Tony. Councillor Swings.
Hey, this is quite cool. And will we get to see this the actual strategy framework at some point in time? I'm personally quite interested in it because that's part of my research at the moment. Mātauranga, disaster risk resilience, and the agricultural sector. So it's quite cool to see that. But I've got 5 questions, but I'll focus on a couple of them here. Obviously, there's intellectual property rights, and I presume that a lot of the framework has been driven by Y262. Am I assuming that right? Or is that come into it?
I'll start, and Alex might want to contribute, but obviously there are data sovereignty questions within this, and you could argue that some of the challenge in getting a Mātauranga program up and running is understanding what's the interface between Papatapu, who have the rangatiratanga or the data sovereignty of their Mātauranga, and how we use it as an authority and apply it into decision making. So that's part of the interface, and it's part of the work that why developing it as a program is useful, because we can start to explore and understand, what our uses of Mātauranga are, and on that basis, Papatapu Runanga can provide Mātauranga to meet that. So an example could be plan effectiveness. So one of the functions of council is to review the effectiveness of a statutory RMA plan. Mātauranga, we have the understanding, should have the understanding with Papatapu about how that Mātauranga comes across and informs, and there's transparency around that, and I guess their agreement with regard to how we've used that knowledge and interpreted it.
I'm just going to have to digest that because Y262 requires us to do a heck of a lot of stuff, which is good. I'm going to have to digest that a little bit. The next one that I've got, the next question I have is actually around resources, so internal resources. So there's a heck of a lot more legislative stuff that come into us around Mātauranga while we engage with support. You know what I'm saying. Do we have the resources, and how do we have enough resources to do this? And do the Papatapu partners have enough resources to do this? And how will we get those resources? Funding element is very critical part.
So through the last long-term plan, we had, I guess, a best guess at what starting to resource the Mātauranga work stream could look like to at least start the ball rolling, and enable us to have the conversations with Papatapu Runanga. As I've said, to date, a lot of that has been bespoke and one-off projects, but as we move more to a programmatic approach, we'll get a clearer understanding of what it takes to actually resource that, and how the partnership works together, for what our obligation as a council, given our requirements and regulation and statute, how we need to enable and support that so that the Mātauranga is available as we make the request for it.
Very briefly, the next part of that is, given the current government, is there a risk of what we're doing here? And has there been a quantified?
In some regards, it comes down to for this council, what you might define as how you make good decisions and what is required to inform good decision making as a council. So when you're making decisions on an RMA plan, if that decision hasn't taken into account all available knowledge, Mātauranga, then there's a question about for yourselves as a council, has that been informed decision making? So whilst there's been national guidance in the sense of regulation, there is equally a question that sits for you as a council as to what entails and is the makeup of good decision making.
Kia ora, David, great answer. Yeah, so it'll be up to us as a team.
Yeah, we'll see. But the next one is, when will we see that draft framework?
So the piece of work that we've started with, particularly with Māhanui Kuratai, because we're recognising that Runanga or the collectives of Runanga are bespoke and will approach this differently. So we would started with Māhanui, their pilot. They're looking to have their methodology and approach to this piece of the program by mid this year, and in fact in a couple of months' time. And then from there they'll move into the actual site selections and actually getting out on the ground with their kaimahi that they already have in place, doing Mātauranga monitoring, doing the actual on the site. But we could certainly bring back an update once we understand the approach that this pilot is taking, so you can see a little bit more of the methodology, I guess.
That's kind of a motivating thing.
Yeah, so that's a good example of where Arowhenua have used the Māori meter methodology. Māhanui Kuratai intending to use the state of the environment, the state of the takiwa methodology. So that's recognising their rangatiratanga and choosing what methodology they use, and that's what we work with. So.
Kia ora, Councillor Brooks, and kia ora, Dave, for those answers. So, Councillor Brooks will want you to hurry up so you can complete the actually. By Councillor Pauling. Kia ora, kōrua. And yeah, good questions, Dion. Yeah, there's a massive background to this, and yeah, David answered that really well. Yeah, I'm really interested in the framework and the strategy too, and I suppose I can understand breaking it up into those sort of different regions. Māhanui and Arowhenua are doing some different things because everyone has maybe a different tool they want to use, which is really important. I suppose, I'm really interested in the time frames and the overall thinking. I think that's probably what we'd like to see, like a bit of what's the timelines. Here's what we're going to do with Māhanui Group. And I'm most interested actually in when we might start utilising that data and when it might be available for reporting. I think there is the IP issues that Dion says, but when you get to a report stage, it is able to be shared. And I suppose that's where I'm really interested in, when we might see a first report come out. I know the Whakakapi stuff was done and that report did come out, so that's great. But we called it the more strategic approach. When might we see that? Is it next year or something? That's what I'd really love to know, just so we can look out for it and be aware that work's moving towards that coming out. My question was really about how does it link into our state of the environment reporting, the wider stuff we mentioned earlier on. I don't know if you were here about our water data monitoring and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, is there any ask of that?
So you might recall there was a previous level of service that was about the framework, and so we had some advice on a framework from Dr. Gail Tipper. One of the challenges in this is the facilitating conversations that are both framework and strategy and actually doing it practically at the same time on the ground. And a frustration that I've shared is we've tended to have framework and strategy conversations that have gone on for a very long time, and we actually haven't started practically monitoring on the ground. So we're trying to marry up both, because we've got to sort of build a methodology for doing this Mātauranga work through the partnership, and that's got to be informed by practically exercising it, and but the importance of having a framework that sits above, and then how we're then applying it in an organisational sense through our reporting. So that's what we're hoping. That's our plan. That's what we're working to. But we agreed we need to probably get some milestones and actually develop this up. The first step has been trying to get this the Runanga entities to buy into a programmatic approach to it, rather than a piecemeal bespoke one. And I think now that we're getting to that point, we can start to now design what does that system look like for us.
The milestones that will be really important to help us understand that. Councillor, one second. Yeah, 1 second. Just confirm, does what you're talking about here sort of relate to the cultural audit work that we had a look at a little while ago? Is there a linkage there?
It does, in the sense of the maturity. So how, for example, we the questions around data sovereignty and how we recognise within a treaty framework, information that's held by the treaty partner, and how we then interface with that as an organisation. That's a key element. So it is part of that maturity framework that the working group has seen.
Kia ora kōrua. Thank you, David. We'll put the resolution up on page 26. That the Land and Water and Land Committee received Mātauranga Māori update, moved by Councillor Swift, seconded by Councillor Pauling. Kia ora. Any comments? Like to speak on it? No. Any comments? Any comments from the floor? I'll say as a chair, just that being here 3 terms, as I said, this is the first time it's been reported. Just say how far the council has come. That actually we can report on Mātauranga Māori, and actually it's a part of the organisation. So I'd just like to acknowledge the council and also the staff for the work they've done over the last 8 years to make sure this can happen. I suppose for me it shows maturity of the organisation and working with mana whenua to actually get to this point. Yeah, those two. Taranaki supporting Mātou. Therefore, the motion's been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? None. Carried. Shoulder. So therefore, number 9. Next meeting is the 26th of June. Hopefully we'll have the financials on that one as well. Tim, correct? Good. No pressure. And Mihi Whakakapi, Councillor Burns, you want to defer to Councillor Pauling, or would you like to do it? Councillor Burns.
Whakatau mai te wairua, whakawātia mai te hininaro, whakariti mai te tinana, kina hawi whā, te hei nauri ora.